Hello, it's Grace. Welcome back to my channel. And today the video that I'm going to be doing is a book review, and that will be Elatsoe by Darcy Littlebadger. So Elatsoe is a young adult, maybe middle grade, maybe somewhere in that range book that is based in an America that is very close to our own world, but magic has influenced things. So essentially the setup for this novel is that myths and legends are real and they have shaped the world, and ghosts and creatures and things like that, they exist, and so they play a part in the way that history has unfolded, and so it has had an impact on everything. So in this world where myths and legends are true, we have Elatsoe and her family, who are Indigenous Americans, and they are Apache, and Elatsoe's family has the ability to raise the dead or to communicate with ghosts. And so the female line of Elatsoe's family has passed this secret down for generations. And this is where we meet Elatsoe, or Ellie as she goes by in the book, where she's a 17-year-old girl and her summer holidays are just about to start. She's living, by all accounts, a pretty normal life when she finds out that her cousin Trevor, who was well loved, has been killed in a car accident. And so obviously her family is very taken aback and grieving, but because Ellie can communicate with the dead, her cousin manages to communicate with her and tells her that everything might not be exactly what it seems with his accident. And so this basically spurs Ellie to want to investigate and to make sure that she uncovers the truth behind her cousin's death and gets him the justice that he deserves. So that's basically the synopsis. And I will do a little bit of spoiler-free thoughts, and then I'll do a little bit of spoiler thoughts as well, but I'll make it very clear where things will shift into spoilers, so no worries there. But I really, really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4.5 stars, although on Goodreads I gave it 5 stars because I didn't feel like I could give it 4 stars. But I use half stars in my head, so this was 4.5 stars. And I just loved the way that the concept of magic being real and myths and legends was integrated into the story. That was one of my favorite parts of this entire thing, because there are a lot of urban fantasy books where things like this are a secret and the main character discovers it or finds a way into a world that they didn't know existed. And I like that trope a lot. I just thought that it was really interesting to see the flip side of it, where things are totally normalized. Like, for example, they have fairy rings that actually provide international travel, and people can use them to instantaneously travel from one fairy ring to another as an actual sanctioned mode of transportation. And vampires are documented as cursed individuals and can be treated and are a known quantity. I just thought that that was such an interesting idea, and the way that she did it was perfectly balanced with the story, where it was very relevant and it was a main focus, but it didn't overwhelm the rest of the story. So another thing that I really liked in this book was the mystery itself and the nature of it, because when Elatsoe goes to investigate her cousin's death, you have that trope of like a small town where something isn't quite right, even though the facade seems so perfect on the surface. And it gave me those really creepy vibes where you're just waiting to see what exactly it is that's wrong, because you know that a bunch of people are in on it and you wonder what they have going on. So I really liked that reveal. I would say that the major thing that made me enjoy this book so much were the character relationships themselves. And they were not the source of tension or of action in the book, but that was actually what I liked about them. So at the start of the book, when Ellie has reason to believe that her cousin was not just killed in a car accident, but there may have been some foul play going on, she does so through her gift, and her parents are supportive, and they believe her, and they help her, and they're able to actually communicate and work together to solve a problem, and they all care about her cousin. And I just loved that, because I didn't want this to be like the teenager knows something but nobody believes her, so she has to go it alone. I thought it was really refreshing to see a family unit that was actually respectful of their kid and had like just such this solid family relationship. And I thought the same thing there that I did with Ellie and her friend Jay. So Ellie and Jay just seemed to work so well together and fit so well together, and they had so much fun on their adventures and during their investigation. I just loved the two of them. Like, they were a great duo, and they were really enjoyable to follow. And that brings me to another point where I really enjoyed the representation that Ellie brought. I thought that it was done in a really interesting way, and there are a couple of facets of that. First of all, I love to see asexual representation in books, and it was hinted at earlier on, and then later on it was explicitly stated, but I didn't think it was done in an unnatural way. It was just a way to tell the reader, like, hey, this is what's going on, just in case you had missed it with the subtler hints earlier. So there's that. I love to see asexual representation. That's fantastic. And the other part is her Indigenous heritage, which obviously is a big one, because that is visible. Like, Ellie throughout the book has experiences with racism where Jay means well but doesn't understand that people look at Ellie differently from the way that they look at him. And Ellie talks about like water off a duck's back if someone is rude to her and things like that. And it's just very interesting to see the perspective on life that she brought, having dealt with these things her whole life. Another thing about this book that I absolutely loved was the animal companion. And so I won't go into that too much because of spoilers, but earlier on in the book, it's not a spoiler at all, because you meet Ellie's ghost dog Kirby immediately, and he is adorable and just like a fantastic concept and a fantastic addition to the story, because I think that a lot of dog lovers can relate to the fact that if you could raise ghosts, then you would definitely keep your dog with you after it passes. You would just be like, yeah, no, do you want to come back and like still be my dog, but just as a ghost this time? I loved Kirby. Favorite character. No, I'm kidding, but am I? And a couple other things that I thought were really well done throughout the book were the pacing and the plot, and they kind of are the same thing for the purposes of this point that I'm making, just because I liked the plot and I thought that the beats of the story were paced very well, and so that helped the plot overall in terms of the structure of the book, because towards the beginning a lot of it is a little bit slower and it is build up, but it's not too slow and it's not boring. And then when we get to the climax of the book, which I won't go into any detail whatsoever about, but when we get to the climax, the things that we've been waiting the whole book to see resolved, they are given the time to play out, and it's not too fast or too slow, I didn't think. Like, the tension was raised the whole time, so the pacing was done well in that sense, but it also didn't overstay its welcome. We saw the resolution, and then we had a little bit of like falling action where we got to spend time with the characters afterwards, and I was left feeling very satisfied at the end. The only thing that I will say is I didn't really feel like the stakes were too high. And I can obviously excuse that for a book that falls somewhere between middle grade and young adult, but it was something that was just there in the back of my mind the whole time, and I think that that's why this wasn't like a perfect 5-star for me, but like 4.5 stars, I still immensely enjoyed myself. So I'm sure that there is something that I'm forgetting to mention that I will kick myself for later, but I think that's going to be the end of my spoiler-free thoughts. And so if you don't want to hear spoilers, I am going to put timestamps in the description, and you can skip to the end of the video to hear my final thoughts if you would like to, but I'm going to pop into spoilers now, so if you have not read the book, proceed no further, and I will see you at the end of the video if you choose to hop over there. So the first thing that I want to talk about in the spoiler section are the stories within the stories that we got, because I just thought that Elatsoe's 6th great-grandmother was a fantastic addition and was so interesting and added so much depth to the world. And I loved the fact that these stories had been passed down for generations about the monsters that she had fought, like the 2-headed river monster that can take the face of the last person that it killed. I mean, first of all, that's terrifying, but also it's so interesting. And like the coyote woman that her and 6th great-grandfather traveled with for a while, being, I think, the same coyote woman from the very end of the book. And then the legend about how 6th great had killed the leech, I believe. And then Ellie and Trevor ran into it on their hike, and Ellie had to kill it, and she was finishing 6th great's legacy where she didn't quite manage to kill it. All of those stories, I loved them. I ate them up. I honestly feel like I will pick this book up and flip to those sections and just read the stories from the past because they were so interesting. And so maybe this just means that I don't know enough about Indigenous culture and I need to go learn more about it, but I loved those stories. So another thing in spoilers that I want to get into is how the mystery unraveled and what was actually going on in the town of Willoughby. I really didn't know what was up. Like, I was starting to piece clues together, and I figured that somehow Dr. Allerton was involved in all of these past accidents, but I really didn't, I didn't piece that together in my brain. And so when they actually said what he had the power to do, and moving injuries from injured bodies to healthy bodies, like giving someone's injury to someone else, I was like, mind blown. Like, I get that there were a lot of magical elements in the world already, but the capacity to do something like that, I guess the precedent was set by the fact that Elatsoe's family had a secret that they had passed down for generations, and so Dr. Allerton's family was the same, and that was their secret that they had passed down for generations, but I wasn't prepared for it. And the fact that that was why the vampires were there was because they get their curses exchanged for younger curses. The whole thing, I really didn't see it coming. But then when you look back, you're like, oh, of course. So this is just the type of mystery that I love, because really it was me that felt dumb in the end, because Darcy Little Badger did the work and laid the groundwork for the reveal very, very well. And there's also one moment in particular where Elatsoe and Dr. Allerton are facing off near the climax of the book, and Dr. Allerton is like, what, did you think that I was going to die and leave my wife and son? And Ellie's like, yes, why is that even a question? Of course that's what you should have done. And I was like, you go, girl. It's sort of like the villain waxing poetic about philosophy and well, my life is important too, and Ellie is just not having any of that. So that was so entertaining. I loved that. I also really liked the resolution because it fit so well with Ellie's character and what we learned about her throughout the book to that point. And obviously, her foray into the underworld earlier in the book was set up so that the resolution would be able to happen. And it's a little bit obvious that that was done that way. But that didn't bother me just because I felt like she explores her power so much and she was always pushing the limits of it anyway. So that doesn't feel unnatural for me to have happened. And so I really liked that that was how she resolved everything, was by leaving Dr. Allerton in the underworld. I mean, cool as hell, by the way. But in terms of like story, I did really like how that fit together as well. I thought that that was set up well. And I think that that's all that I want to talk about in terms of spoilers. Again, there's probably something that I'm missing that I'm going to remember afterwards, but I think I've gotten all of the important stuff. So let's jump back to non-spoilers and we will just do a quick wrap up. And I do actually just want to mention, I know I said this in my other video, but I'm not over it. This book is beautiful, truly. Like the artwork by Rovina Kai, I believe that's how you say it. Like you can just tell that a lot of care went into producing this. And not to mention, I showed it in my last video, but there's artwork on the bare book as well when you take off the dust jacket. This is just really gorgeous. So the actual physical reading experience was amazing too. This is one of the most enjoyable books that I've read this year, possibly because it's still fantasy, but it's really different from what I normally read. It's like a mix of contemporary and fantasy with like magic really embedded in the world and the culture. And I also really liked Ellie's perspective and what she brought and learning about her Indigenous culture and how her story unfolded. And so again, I gave this 4.5 stars. I would totally recommend it. If you've read this book, drop in the comments and let me know what you thought. If you have any questions about this book, you can definitely reach out to me and I would love to tell you about it. And I will also leave my Goodreads review linked down below where I say a lot of the same things, but if you're interested, it will be there. It is non-spoiler. That's all for my review of Elatsoe by Darcy Little Badger. So thank you so much for watching. Like if you liked the video, subscribe if you would like to, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye.